Morning riders, Motojourno Kris here for MCNews.com.au. I am at the Honda Hornet 750 launch. This is their new 755cc parallel twin platform, which is obviously being launched first here in Australia ahead of the adventure version in the Hornet. And we're just about to head off up the Black Spur in Melbourne and have a go on this bike. So I'm really keen to see just what is on offer here from Honda. It is a really interesting proposition. It has essentially a really affordable competitive buy-in for a 750 bike. So obviously you're not getting a lamb's version of this. However, you're getting a whole heap of extra electronics that you wouldn't normally see in, say, the 650 class. TFT display, some really cool upside down forks, quite a looker of a machine. I'm not really sure about the headlight yet, but the rest of the bike works for me. So we're heading out now. Let's have a look at just how good this bike is. So we've just had an amazing day on the new Hornet 750 from Honda. As you can see here, the absolute gem is that new parallel twin engine. So it's a 270-degree parallel twin, which is my personal favorite, 755 cc's. And realistically, I would say this bike takes the 650 class just a couple of steps up in every way imaginable. You're getting a TFT display, which is very nice to see, but it is backed up by quite a generous electronics package. You've got ride modes, you've got engine brake control, you've got traction control, and the combination of the three with the three ride modes provided offers a very distinct kind of power delivery, and those modes really do make a difference. They really change the character of the bike quite considerably. Sport mode, very aggressive, very fun. Standard mode, more your kind of everyday mode that does everything, and then your rain mode is quite subdued in comparison, but was perfect for this morning in the pouring rain.
As far as the engine itself, you've got smooth and forgiving power in the lower parts of the rev range, below about 5,000 RPM, that turns into a stonking mid-range, which feels almost more V-twin than parallel twin. You're certainly not losing out in not having a 4-cylinder here. Then add a great intake howl, ensuring a very rewarding ride, especially having a bit of a fang and getting aggressive on that throttle. It's just quite addictive. You don't really need to rev the bike right up towards that red line at 10k or so. However, when you do, you can appreciate that 90 horsepower and stronger top end than some of the more limited 70 horsepower options this seems likely to be measured against. It just means a slightly stronger top end, which pulls quite well right up there instead of falling off. I'd say the mid-range is what most riders will be raving about though. Obviously, this is no 200 horsepower superbike, but I've gotta say, riding the Hornet, I'd be hard pressed to think I ever need more power than this on the road. Gears are quite tall. I think I saw almost 140 in third with good gear engagement and easy to find neutral. While I didn't have a quick shifter equipped to the bikes I tested, the higher power mode you run, the more likely you are to encounter a bit of snappiness from an otherwise fairly smooth engine, most noticeably in Sport, which is power mode 3, the highest power mode. As far as how those power modes work, apparently they all offer maximum power eventually, but you're just getting a very different delivery, and that is really noticeable knocking through those user modes. My preferred user setup would actually be power mode 2, engine brake 1, HSTC 1, although sport mode on the good roads is likely to be the go-to. I just found sport a little bit aggressive, and certainly on the rougher roads, I was actually noticing some of those bumps from the suspension were getting kind of transferred through to the throttle. Knock that traction control down to 0 for wheelies, but keep in mind it turns back to 1 when the bike is turned off and back on. We don't see cornering ABS or traction control, of course, with no IMU on the Hornet, but again, we've got to look at the buy-in here and be realistic, especially with Honda adding their own mobile voice command system as a bit of a perk. Handling is as good as the power plant too, in my mind. The Hornet is well balanced front to rear, carries its weight well on the move, and feels like a smaller, lighter machine, apart from the somewhat tall bars. Changes of direction are as easy as you could want, and the handling is coming close to telepathic. The sheer confidence the bike provides is going to make the Hornet a bike which is easy to ride faster, alongside a very forgiving nature. I'd be hard pressed to name a better handler in my mind in the 650 category, and this would be my pick over an 890R or Aprilia 660. I actually think the bike being so confidence inspiring makes it easy to not realise the speed you're carrying or just how fast you're going, which is something I noticed when I was kind of just cruising along on the Hornet out of Sydney, and I looked down and noticed just how much faster I was going than I thought. Where the pricing of the Hornet does reveal itself was in the shock performance though, which I thought was good at the launch, but another 150km loop closer to home on roads I know really well, with some poorer surfaces, did prove a little bit less forgiving, and highlights this is really the one area I wouldn't mind seeing better performance. The preload adjustable only shock is the norm in this price range and segment of bikes, and really the performance on offer isn't any worse than anything comparable, but with the bike impressing otherwise, it was an obvious weakness which really stood out. Overall, within expectations however. At 75 kilos, if I owned one of these bikes, I'd probably have a play around with the preload and see if there was any improvement there, and also see where I landed on tyre pressure, because that can sometimes soften up the rear a little bit. Even different tyre choices can do that, before turning to get the suspension looked up at a professional or a shop. Mainly because I would guess a small investment there would pay big dividends. Necessary? Probably not. Maybe not for a daily rider with more restrained needs, but likely a very, very rewarding investment in money on an otherwise exceptional machine. Apart from that, we're getting some USD forks, as you can see here on the front. So those are painted, so they do stand out. Non-adjustable. It is a more basic kind of suspension system in a way, but I found it quite good today. It's kind of what you'd expect for around that 13.5 grand mark. However, the brakes, while not super crazy on the bite, had really, really good power, really good modulation, a very, very easy brake system to use if you're a slightly newer or a new moving up to intermediate rider, so exceptional in that regard. You could really trail those brakes right into the corner quite aggressively, nice and smooth on and off the brakes, and the forks were well supported there as well. Apart from that, I'll just jump on the bike. So you've got a nice, quite low seat height, 795 millimeters, easy reach to those quite wide bars, very natural upright seating position, so it's going to be inviting for the vast majority of riders who don't want a sports bike. Good vision through the mirrors, very, very comfortable ergos overall. Seat pretty good, I'd say, for an hour or two. Spending a full day on the bike, maybe not so much, but that's pretty much the norm in this category. It'd be very, very rare to find a bike with a seat that is going to be good for full days of riding in most of the categories, let's be honest. Apart from that, we're really just looking at a super competitive package, which I think is going to make it quite difficult for some of the older options, which it overlaps with quite considerably. But I actually also think that some of those naked bikes around that $20,000 mark, which are exceptional machines, are going to find this very, very hard competition, because the value on offer is just so exceptional. While it may not have necessarily the adjustable suspension and some of the bells and whistles, it is an exceptional package which is very, very competitive. Naturally, the Hornet CB750 isn't going to be for everyone, and as stated, it is not LAMS legal here in Australia. But the bike reminds me of the mid-range machines available about 10 years ago that were so popular. A nice step up from the full power 650 class, but not reaching into the stratosphere of needing to spend 18 or 20k for what is essentially a mid-capacity naked bike. Plus, the Hornet is made in Japan, and the build quality definitely reflects that to my eye, marking another area where the bike stands out. Whether you like the bright frame and forks will of course be subjective, like all styling and paint schemes, with just a white and black option available for now. It is worth noting though that the paint has a nice subtle flake through it. Competition at this stage seems to be the Z900 from Kawasaki and the GSX 8S, which will be launching later in this year here in Australia, as well as much of the 650 class, which, generally speaking, is pretty outclassed. So don't forget to check out the full written review at MCNews.com.au. I'm Motojourno Kris, thanks for watching and have a great one.